When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. They all sang the Internationale. Völker, hört die Signale auf zum letzten Gefecht. Die Internationale erkämpft das Menschenrecht. Völker, hört die Signale auf zum letzten Gefecht. Die Internationale erkämpft das Menschenrecht.
All right. Hello and welcome to Revolutionary Socialist Review. This is Chris Driscoll, and along with me is Rainer Shea. Hello, Rainer. How are you?
Hello. I see you got a few of my articles lined up for us to talk about tonight, and we're going to have a discussion at some point in this next hour or so that I think is important for us in this movement to have. It pertains to the question of how we're going to get to militarily overcome the United States. So I'm excited to get to this topic at some point.
Yeah. And I think the question is how we're going to militarily defend ourselves from the brutal, terroristic violence that the United States always visits on working class people when we fight for our rights, when we struggle for a better future. But we'll talk all about that. First up on the topic list tonight, this is really a surprise to me. Police attacked the PSL. Of course, we've talked about this party a few times. The Party of Socialism and Liberation. It was a split back in 2004 of a faction or fraction of the Workers' World Party, and went off to form their own party. One of the key people in that's a person I've known for quite a long time, know pretty well. A former roommate of mine was a roommate of his. That's Brian Becker, who is the executive director of Answer Coalition, which has been around since the turn of the century. It has been quite a successful anti-war, anti-racism, pro-people, pro-working class coalition. And it's still going strong. I noticed they were doing something just over the weekend. Anyway, police attacked PSL, and a little background on this. The Denver comrades of the PSL have been in the leadership of and instrumental in helping to organize the anti-police brutality, anti-police state demonstrations that have been ongoing. Of course, with our lousy media, we have heard nothing about this, but apparently they've been holding these demonstrations pretty much on a daily basis since the murder of George Floyd. And that's how many months is that, Rainer? I mean, it's a long, it's several months. 4 months now. So this has been going on for 4 months. People aren't stopping. That's the thing we need to get across. Millions of people have been out protesting about this, and millions of people apparently still are protesting. So along comes another police murder in Denver. A young man who's autistic was walking down the street, dancing a little bit in the street. I guess something that he did. His parents said that they knew that he did that when he was out and about, and it was dark. Tall, young black man, and apparently, some neighbors. This was fairly close to his home, I think. Some neighbors called the police. There's this strange man. The neighbors who called told the police he didn't look like a threat. He wasn't armed. He didn't look dangerous. But they were concerned, I guess, about this young man. The police come, and immediately, what do police do? They grab the kid, and the kid's like struggling. Of course, I mean, autistic people, from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, but autistic people tend not to like to be touched. It's like a real thing for them. I'm not too familiar with the condition, but I know enough that if I saw a person who is obviously, on the spectrum, as they say, I wouldn't be grabbing him and trying to throw him to the ground like the pigs do. Well, these pigs who have been violently attacking peaceful demonstrators in Denver, they threw this poor kid to the ground. The kid was, struggling and saying, "Please, I want to cooperate." Apparently, he told them that he just wanted to be left alone. Please leave him alone. He's going on his way home. The pigs were having none of it. The kids struggled. Well, another murder, another police murder, very similar to the next one we're going to be talking about in a couple of minutes, the murder of Daniel Prude in Rochester, New York. And this outrageous thing happened. So demonstrators were out, including these 4 PSL members, protesting around the police station where the police who perpetrated this murder were hiding out, were whatever the hell they were doing inside the building. They had the building all surrounded. They were protesting. They're demanding that the county attorney, district attorney, arrest these, I think it was 4 again, police officers who were involved in this murder of this young autistic man. Well, lo and behold, these 4 people from the PSL were arrested, charged with kidnapping. Now, kidnapping? What the fuck? You ask. What does this mean, kidnapping? I mean, how kidnapping? This is crazy, isn't it, Rainer? It's just literally crazy. They're charging these people with, I think, 15 felony charges, including kidnapping. And the pigs say, oh, they felt trapped inside the pig station. So they felt as though they were being kidnapped. It's just incredible. The district attorney that brought this, he's a Democrat, of course. No surprise there, is there, Rainer? No surprise that this guy is a Democrat. He had told them earlier, well, we can't arrest these 4 police officers. They probably did something wrong, but there's not enough evidence for us to make it stick. So there's no use in charging them. So that's incredible in and of itself. They won't charge the pigs who murdered a young man. However, they will charge these 4 young communists with kidnapping, for fuck's sake. It's just a ridiculous thing. This came to my attention from Eugene Poirier. I get his name wrong all the time. Poirier, thank you.
Poirier.
Yeah, he was a guest on the Katie Helper podcast yesterday. Her Sunday afternoon, I guess she has a regular Sunday afternoon, is one of the days that she does it, her podcast. She's on another show as well. She does the show with Matt Taibbi from Rolling Stone. They call that show Useful Idiots. I love that name. But anyway, so she says she's a Marxist. I don't know a whole lot about her, but she's a funny woman, and I guess she's a comedian by trade. She had Eugene on there. Now, I've never personally met Eugene, but he was in the DC area for a good long time when I was there. He's got a really good reputation. He was the vice presidential candidate of the Party of Socialism and Liberation. I believe it was in 2012, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe you know better, Rainer. You kind of follow the PSL better than I do. But he's a very articulate young man in his 30s, really impressive in my opinion, and knows his Marxism, knows his Leninism, as I would expect anyone who was trained by Brian. And he says that in talking to her, he said that Brian had a lot to do with mentoring him. Anyway, he was very impressive yesterday talking about this. I guess he normally does this show called By Any Means Necessary on Sputnik Radio, which is a great show, by the way. However, apparently he's quit just recently in the last week or so, and he's in Denver now, helping to organize the defense for his 4 comrades who were so unjustly arrested for protesting this pig murder, this police murder. So there you have it. In my opinion, it doesn't matter what you think about PSL. If you're a working class person, I have my criticisms. People have heard me criticize PSL for critically endorsing Bernie Sheepdog Sanders in the last few months, or prior to the last few months, I should say. So I've had my criticisms. I have had long chats with Brian over the years and gone back and forth with him, but it's always of a comradely nature. And in a case like this, these people are being attacked by the police, by the U.S. I'm sure that this is at the instigation of some federal agency, BTW. So this is a time for, if you're working class, you are compelled by your own self-interests to come to the defense of these 4 people. Now, I didn't get all the details yet. I'll come back with that in a future episode, but so I didn't get like the names of the 4 comrades who were attacked in this outrageous manner. But they need our solidarity right now. And that's what I'm appealing to our audience for. Rainer, thoughts?
There are a couple facets to this. One, it's really incredible and disturbing hearing this recent story about these people saw this guy in the dark, and their decision, their judgment call was to call the police. And I guess it shows that this is where the consciousness of a lot of people are at. Because if I saw somebody out there in the dark, and I was aware that they're unarmed and didn't seem like a threat, like these people admitted saying how they viewed it, then I would not call the police. Because especially in these last 4 months, with all this awareness being raised about the dangers of the police, and how there's this antagonistic relationship, and how easily it can escalate to violence. And I don't know if they knew he was black, or if they knew he was autistic, but there's another factor. Well, it should be common sense that you shouldn't call the police unless it's at least unless it's absolutely necessary, unless it's like objectively necessary for this group of armed men to come in. And even then,
like someone shooting a gun at you, something like that.
Yeah.
But not somebody dancing. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. So it shows how this lack of consciousness among these bystanders, these random people in this neighborhood somewhere, could lead to violence. And man, I think it's the result of a lack of education, and resorting to this default solution of calling the police. And then there's the facet of how there's a rising paradigm of McCarthyism, as always happens when class struggle is at a point where it's escalating. And I remember a couple months ago, it was primarily the anarchists who were being persecuted by the state, I think in Portland, with these Gestapo style tactics. And now these four PSL members are being they're having these outrageous charges stacked upon them, really trumped up, as they would say. And it speaks to an atmosphere of increasing antagonism between the state and between political organizers. I wonder if the fact that they were communists had anything directly to do with the reasoning behind this. I bet it's likely that it did, but even if they weren't communists, I bet they might have also been charged with kidnapping, because you know how these things go in the United States. The police tend to throw on these absurd charges against political protesters in order to make it easier to get, which is persecution and intimidation. It's all about the process of class struggle and carrying out a campaign of rising McCarthyism.
Yes. Well put. I believe absolutely, based on the evidence, that they were targeted because they're communists. I said leadership, they were in the leadership. This is a large movement going on. I mean, I saw a picture of the actual demonstration outside the police station, and it was large. It was very large. So they are in the leadership, not the leaders of this movement. So obviously there are many others who were involved in leading these people to this police station to show the police. And obviously in America, we have the political right, hard fought by sweat and blood of working class over hundreds of years. We have the right to protest the police when they murder one of our own. That's wrong. And, you know, so obviously they have that right. But yeah, I think given the fact that there were all these other people they could have chosen, they just decided to choose these 4 people. And that's the way they've done things. I mean, every time through history you hear these, you know, the Sacco and Vanzetti, I'm trying to think of examples. The Chicago 8, Chicago that became the Chicago 7, because Bobby Seale decided he wanted to be tried on his own, which you can't blame him for that. The other 7 people were all white people, and he was black. So, I mean, there's a good reason for him to want to have his own defense. But you know, in all these different cases, they target specific people. They were far from being the only ones. You know, the Haymarket massacre in the 1898 or 6, something like that, way back when, the Haymarket massacre. Once again, you know, I think it was 5 or 6 people who were all anarchists, by the way, were chosen to be the sacrificial lambs in that one, and were all executed. This is the way these pigs do it. And this has the MO of the federal government. This is not something that the police cooked up, or that this county district attorney cooked up. No, they're getting their marching orders from far above. And anyone who knows anything about financing of states and counties and cities will know that a good deal of their financing comes from the federal government, and the federal government uses those strings to pull the puppets when they want to. That's the way it works. So anyway, we got another one to deal with. This, I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this, mainly because we're already 25 minutes, or at least 23 minutes into the show. And we've got a long agenda, but the murder of Daniel Prude in Rochester, New York. I've spoken about this in past shows. And first of all, a correction to start with. I reported his murder wrongly, I had said, because I had seen this somewhere at the time. I said that Daniel Prude was in a jail cell already, and that he was murdered in a jail cell. That is not correct. He was, in fact, on the street in front of his brother's house. Those who heard the story already will recall that Daniel Prude was from Minneapolis, Minnesota, visiting his brother in Rochester, New York. Apparently, he was high on PCP. That is what the toxicology county officials said, in any case, for whatever you can trust them, that he was high on. And apparently, when you look at, I finally got a chance to look at the video of this, the video that was forced out into the public by Prude's wife and supporters. And the video did show that he was acting in a kind of an erratic way, like a person on PCP would act. However, you know, it reminds me of a meme I saw from a Facebook friend of mine who is a nurse here in Phoenix, Arizona. And she does a lot of solidarity work, you know, going to help workers in dire situations and stuff like that. But she said, you know, I've been working in an ER for 20 years or whatever, And she says, we deal with people who are high on drugs and alcohol every day, but we've never had to shoot one of them. We've never had to kill one of them. You know, we've never had to strangle one of them or force them to swallow their own vomit and breathe up their own vomit to the point where they died. She says, we always manage to handle it because we handle it as a medical emergency, not as some kind of, you know, police raid or, you know, military operation. And I think that's definitely true in this case. Danial Prude, of course, he was knocked to the ground. I have, if you look at the video, which you just look up Danial Prude, Rochester, New York video, and it'll come popping up. Matter of fact, I think I got it from the New York Post, NY Post. So you can look there for it. But when you look at the video, it's horrifying. It's really worse than I thought it was because it's much less sanitized than the description I had given originally, not knowing all the facts. But Danial Prude was pushed down on the ground, a bag put over his head, terrible, terrible situation. And as I said, when talking about the PSL arrests, a lot of these demonstrations are going on. We are not hearing anywhere near most of them. And I wish I had a way of, a better way of finding out these things. I just kind of stumble on them haphazardly rather than, I wish there was a clearinghouse. And maybe there is for all I know, but I wish there was a clearinghouse that would put all this up there. Anyway, that's it, Rainer.
Isn't it another example of lack of consciousness about the nature of the police leading to tragedy? It seems like it's a default solution for a lot of people. There's the archetypal Karen who goes in public and calls the police to because she's annoyed with someone or something, and it's that this impulse to call the police is so ingrained in people that I guess you can't expect more from the typical American. There, even in this time when Black Lives Matter has been agitating so hard to get people aware of the dangers of this institution and all the violent risks that come with having this institution in existence even. So I feel like you couldn't expect more from a typical bystander in this country, and it's so sad. It's like for everyone who's been putting in the effort to learn from this agitation work that BLM has been doing, there's 10 people who just keep going with the default, who keep acting like the police are gonna fix things, who won't question this the nature of this institution and how much of a threat it is capable of posing.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, next on the list, austerity at home and imperialism abroad. What a Joe Biden win would mean for America. This is a fascinating, this comes from a fascinating article. Let me just pop it up here so that I can get it up here. Here we go. Yeah, this is from Mint Press, which we've mentioned quite often. Rayner was just complaining a couple weeks ago that they hadn't updated, and they have updated now. I've got a couple articles on tonight that we'll be talking about. But this article in particular, it's by Roger D. Harris. He's on the State Central Committee of the Peace and Freedom Party, the only ballot qualified socialist party in California. Of course, there are other socialist parties in California, but that's the only one that's going to be on the ballot this year. Peace and Freedom's been on the ballot for whatever, like 40, 50 years now. They've been really well known. Anyway, I'm just going to read you a little bit of this. I was so impressed by this. First of all, let me say, Harris does a great job, first of all, of talking about the egregious, the terrible, the brutal and wicked record of Democrats in power, Democrats in the White House, Democrats in the Senate and in the House of Representatives. And so people should look this up just for that. Go to Mint Press News, M-I-N-T, like the, you know, you put in your mint jewel up, mintpressnews.com, and look for this article, Austerity Wars Abroad, so forth and so on, Joe Biden. Anyway, I'm just going to read you the last couple of graphs here, paragraphs. Harris says, the former senator from MasterCard has already assured Wall Street that their privileged position will be protected on his watch. And he supplies a link about the story of when Biden went to talk to Wall Street and assure them. Biden actually told them, don't listen to what I'm saying out on the campaign trail. It's just to get votes. Don't be upset by that. Your privileged positions will be protected, or something to that effect, on his watch, on Biden's watch. The warmongers have been assuaged with the promise that the military budget can only go up. The insurance parasites know that government-imposed private health policies are set in stone. The Zionists needn't fret about the U.S. recognizing Palestinian rights or of reversing recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Worse than the climate deniers, Biden believes in the science of global warming and knows its catastrophic consequences, yet he will do little about it and has already opposed a fracking ban. Fossil fuel subsidies will continue under the Democrats, under a Biden regime. Note that these dubious promises were made on the campaign trail while trying to attract votes. That's a little comedic aside there. Pelosi, he says, enter the Biden presidency. Pelosi set the stage for a Biden presidency. The first thing the Democrats pushed through after taking back, quote unquote, the House in 2018 was the pay-go rule, a fiscally conservative measure virtually guaranteeing that no progressive legislation can be funded. Then in March of this year, the Democrats unanimously and without any debate helped pass the CARES Act, the largest single transfer of wealth from workers to the wealthy in the history of the world. Democrats, with the Obama-Biden administration and since, have leapfrogged Republicans to the right on foreign policy issues in important respects regarding Afghanistan, North Korea, Russia, Syria, Venezuela, etc. Democrats even oppose drawing down U.S. troops abroad. Trump has been all over the map ineptly and inconsistently pursuing détente with, Putin while threatening Xi Jinping. With a Democrat administration, we can be assured of a more consistent, skillful, and lethal U.S. imperialism pursuing full spectrum dominance over the rest of the world. Those who complain about Trump's bungling should understand that the Biden alternative will be more deadly and efficient rule of capital. We should be careful what we wish for. I was just so impressed with this article. I had to actually, I had to actually read it aloud because it's that impressive. People should go check it out. Check out Mint Press News, for that matter. And Rainer, I know you do all the time, so don't need to tell you. So, what are your thoughts about this? A Biden regime, as the Black Agenda report would probably say, the more effective evil.
It's the more effective evil because it's the type of government that much of the ruling class, both in the U.S. and abroad, would prefer for the United States to have. It's when these last 4 years since Trump has been elected, the ruling class has really been a lot of these elites have been freaking out because, as they express, they see Trump as inconsistent on Russia, and of course they've hyperbolized it through Russiagate and ridiculous narratives about Trump being in Putin's pocket or something along those. And it's all served the purpose of somebody who will be both more committed to advancing a Cold War agenda against Russia and more committed to upholding international treaties and friendly trade relations with Europe. Because something really interesting has been happening in these last 4 years. As Trump has been causing this rift between the U.S. and the EU, and drawing out of treaties like the Paris Climate Accord and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. What's been happening is an example of the contradiction of imperialism explained by Stalin, where the different imperialist powers engage in rivalries over capital, and this results in the muting of these powers, and ultimately the strengthening of the proletarian movements as proletarian revolution becomes more of a practical necessity. So even though this recent dynamic between the U.S. and Europe hasn't been an inter-imperialist war, it's the tense dynamic of it, the instability of it has definitely been worrying all these elites who would prefer for Biden to win, and so they hope that on November 11th, Trump will finally be able to be replaced, and the U.S. will return to the more masked, less bellicose and erratic type of imperialism from the Obama era. But honestly, I don't think this will happen because I've seen the power of Republican voter suppression, and in the Trump era, they've had 4 years to build up this sneaky structure of sabotaging the vote and trying to coordinate right-wing militias, even who could potentially intervene. And Trump has made it clear that he won't accept the results of the election. So who knows what violence it could lead to if it's shown that Biden has gotten the most votes. So I think that the core of the empire has been hijacked by this fascist cabal, this fascist ultranationalist Trumpian cabal, and a lot of the elites are worried about this. So they've been trying to weaponize narratives like Russiagate, and they've even tried to weaponize the FBI against Trump.
Yeah.
So there's definitely been a real serious dispute within the ruling class.
Can I interrupt you for a second? We've got another topic a little bit later on, also from a Mint Press article, talking more specifically about what you're getting into right now. So I wonder if you could hold off the rest.
Okay.
Just look at this as an introduction to that. But meanwhile, the next topic is the U.S. military would not be invincible against a domestic revolt. And that is Rainer Shea, I believe. So take it away.
I've seen you argue, and you've still been able to influence my opinion in this regard. I've seen you argue that it's not really possible for the left, speaking broadly, to be able to militarily defeat the U.S. armed forces. So we should try to depend on the U.S. armed forces getting won over towards a potential revolution. But I've also heard an argument from a communist YouTuber named Hakim. And I think that Hakim potentially has better authority than you or me on what the nature of the U.S. military is and what they could potentially do in a revolutionary situation, because Hakim is an Iraqi, and he says he was there during Operation Desert Storm, and he's seen the brutality and the bigotry and the fascistic impulses of the people who are involved in these campaigns to rob and murder and steal and loot and wreck the locations around the world that become victims of U.S. imperialist wars. And it's very hard for Hakim to believe that in a revolutionary situation, in a situation where the members of this the U.S. armed forces will be forced to choose between serving the capitalist reaction and serving the revolution, he thinks that they'll overwhelmingly choose to serve the reaction. He thinks that there's going to be quite a lot of violence coming from these people, and that we should overwhelmingly fear them. And because of the arguments that you've made about how we should try to win over the military like the Bolsheviks did during the Russian Revolution, I say in my article that I think that it's worthwhile to try to propagate revolutionary theory among the members of the U.S. Armed Forces, because we should try to win over as many of them as we can, and every one of them who defects to our movement is definitely a loss for the United States. But I think what Hakim is trying to say, and what I'm trying to convey in my article, is we need to be realistic. We shouldn't try to we shouldn't try to bank the success of our revolution on something that might not really be as realistic as one might want to think. And then, of course, there's the fact that the material conditions between the 1917 Russia and the 2020's United States are different, and a lot of these soldiers get special privileges. Though I can imagine the types of arguments that you would make in response to this, like a lot of the people within the armed forces are working class. They've gotten involved in this twisted operation through what's been referred to as the poverty draft. Though then there's the counter argument could be made to this, which is that the members of the Tsarist army were conscripted, whereas people in the modern U.S. armed forces have chosen to take this path, which could potentially make them less persuadable, since that they've outright made the choice to be these armed patriots. But what I'm trying to convey in this article is I don't want us to bank on something that might not be reliable. I don't want us to bank on this huge windfall that would depend on breaking through heavy patriotic indoctrination among these people. And I think that we should focus on not just on agitating among U.S. armed forces members, but on building the red bases and the organizations and the armed communist groups that can be capable of waging a war of attrition that systematically weakens the capitalist power structure on this continent, and that that incrementally could win territory from the United States. I cite the Taliban as a potential example. Obviously, no communist would share the Taliban's brutal ideology, but the Taliban is an example of a group of militants who have always been technologically and militarily inferior to the U.S. occupiers, but who have still been able to win much of the territory in Afghanistan and hold that territory largely because of support from Pakistan, and also largely because they've been able to win over support from the local populations that the Taliban occupies. And I bet to those people who support the Taliban, I don't really blame them, because the alternative is supporting the U.S. imperialism that's ravaged their country with corruption and horrendous violence for almost 20 years. So maybe we could do something similar to this in the United States, like try to create a mass base of support within these local regions where the red bases are located, a base of support for a breakaway territory from the United States. And in order to do this, we could agitate among the people and use the crises and point to the capitalist crises that this country is experiencing, use that to convince a lot of people that a drastic alternative is needed, because obviously things are going to get a lot worse in the coming years as this depression continues, and as COVID-19 continues, and as climate collapse continues.
Okay, let me get my mic down. Yeah, lot to digest. Very good article, BTW. I read it a couple of times and was impressed. I was not totally convinced that this is the most likely road for our revolutionary movement to take, but I have, as I've said in the past for a long time, for decades, I have advocated the working class and communist and socialist parties forming our own armed militias for our defense. I think it's all about defense. I think we're being attacked now, and we need defense. So that's, my thoughts on the military, the U.S. military. I don't think that the U.S. military today, the rank and file, which is overwhelmingly working class. We shouldn't just say like, oh yeah, I mean, some of them are working class. No, it is overwhelmingly working class. The middle class tend to go to college. And they tend to get a degree somewhere. When they come out, if they want to go into the military, they're automatic officers. The middle class constitutes the lower, middle, and even some of the upper ranks of the officer class. So that's where the middle class goes, you know, the 20% or so in the US who are middle class. The people who are in the rank and file of the army are overwhelmingly working class, because those are the people who need the job and can't get it anywhere else. We should not gloss over the excuse me, let me take a sip of water. Yeah, we should not gloss over the character of the rank and file military. And I looked at some demographics of the US military today from the last few years, which is, you know, latest that they're out. And these demographics show that when these demographics started being meticulously kept was around 1990, so they use that as a base year. So between 1990 and now, the U.S. military has the rank and file of the U.S. military, and actually the officer class, has become more female. Still a low amount, I think it's like 18%, something like that, but more female, more Black, more Latino, more oppressed nationalities, oppressed ethnicities than in 1990. In 1990, I believe the figure was that the rank and file of the military was 64% white. They use the term white. I'd call it Euro. There's 64% Euro. And today it is 57% Euro. So falling, and it will keep falling because the demographics are changing in America. But these working class kids, they're in that job, and they look at it as that was the only job they could get. Otherwise, they were out in the streets, or they were slinging dope, or, you know, whatever the kind of things that working class kids are forced to do, especially in the inner cities in the United States, where 70% of the United States lives in the cities. So that's where this military comes from. My experience on this subject all comes from the Vietnam War, because I knew people. Andrew Pulley, for example, who was the I think it was 1980 presidential candidate of the Socialist Workers' Party. Andrew Pulley was in the military then. He was thrown in jail for being, you know, protesting the war in Vietnam when it was going on. When he was in the military, he organized people to become socialists, communists, revolutionaries within the military. So I had his experience. Fred Halstead is another person who's also in the Socialist Workers' Party. Back then, I was in the Socialist Workers' Party, so those are the people I knew. During World War II, he helped to organize in China the Bring the Boys Home Now mass uprising within the army, which ended up in 1946 forcing the United States to withdraw a large number of its armed forces that they had stationed in China, you know, against the wishes, of course, of the Chinese Communist Party, which would be taking power in 4 years after that. at the behest of the Kuomintang, the fascistic nationalist party, who the communists were fighting. Yeah, I mean, I've known these people. I've known my own brothers, other people like my two older brothers who were in the military. They told me the kind of conditions that they lived in in Vietnam when they were sent there by the military to carry out this criminal act of aggression against the Vietnamese people. And I know what happened then in the US military from these people describing it to me. I don't believe that the people in the US military today are any different from then, except that they are more working class than they were then, because there was a draft and everybody got drafted. So a lot of these kids were middle class kids. I mean, I come originally from a middle class family. My two brothers were middle class kids. You know, you get drafted, you're drafted, you know, whether you're in the middle class or the working class. It is much more working class now because the only draft going on now is the economic draft. So anyway, I think I have a lot more confidence. I don't have a confidence that any one thing will happen. Neither you nor I have a crystal ball. However, I have a lot of confidence in the working class in this country. I believe in the working class. I'm a believer, you know, it's like a religion to me, I guess, if you want to tell me that, although I also have the scientific backing of Marx and Engels and Lenin and, you know, thousands, millions of other communists that go along with me on this. But I believe the working class is the revolutionary force, has the revolutionary potential. Are there reactionary parts of the working class? Obviously. Most of the middle class, at least most of the white middle class, are reactionary. They're racists. We've seen that. And a minority, but a significant minority of white working class people are also in this category of being racist. You described very well last week the problems with those people. However, I know that those are a minority. I mean, right now, 50% of the working class is Black or Latino or Asian or some other, you know, mixed race or some other category than Euro. So I have that faith, if you want to call it that, although, like I say, it's backed up by scientific evidence, that the working class that we know has the revolutionary potential will also step up to the plate, to use a baseball, what do they call that, baseball analogy or whatever. They'll step up to the plate when the time comes, and they are being pushed. Certainly, the Black and Latino and Asian and other oppressed minorities and oppressed nationalities will step up to the plate. There is no doubt about that to me. Now, as I've always said, do we need militias? Absolutely. Do we need guns in our hands? Do we need to arm and to train and find ways to arm and train, just like our great grandfathers and grandfathers did in the 1930s? You're damn right we do. So this is a discussion we got to keep moving on with. And, you know, if we're ever in a position where we're in a guerrilla war fighting these fascists who have already, through the Democrat and Republican parties, taken over, they have not succeeded in putting a full fascist regime in place Donald Trump even has not succeeded in that. We still have many rights that are worth fighting for, and we will fight for them. But if we are in a position where we're in a guerrilla situation, you know, I would, if I was looking for an example, I would look at Mao much more closely than the Taliban. The Taliban, first of all, they were funded to the tune of billions of dollars. Remember where the Taliban came from. Jimmy Carter and later on Ronald Reagan funded the Taliban. They weren't called the Taliban then, but funded the people who became the Taliban to the tune of billions of dollars. I don't think anybody's going to be funding you to the tune of billions of dollars unless we can, you know, get, like you said last week, North Korea or Cuba, when those the two that you said might do that. You know, I don't think we can count on anybody for that. If it comes, and we'll be happy to take the solidarity. And in fact, the solidarity should, in that case, come from the working class all around the world. Let's hope that it does, and we'll try to organize that. But if we're in that situation, you know, I'm with you 100% as far as good as any 66-year-old handicapped man can do. But I'm there with whatever I can do. So it's not that I would be afraid of jumping into the fray if that's what we needed to do, because yes, that's what we need to do. That's what we need to do. I just think that the route taken through the Russian Revolution is much more probable for us, given our traditions, history, circumstances. But you know, these are debates about emphasis, about something that's in the future. We don't really know. So the best thing, I have a little saying I say around my family all the time. It's hope for the best, prepare for the worst. And I believe that firmly. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Neither an optimist nor a pessimist be. Be prepared for what comes.
Yeah, well said.
Okay, is that it? Maybe we can bring other people in on this discussion in future episodes of our show. Meanwhile, look at the clock here. We got 9:05. That means we've got 55 minutes left to do our business, and I think we can accomplish that. The U.S. Oh, that's the one you just did. The Assange hearing, Julian Assange hearing, day 10. Now, people will recall that the Assange hearing over in London, England's the extradition hearing had been postponed a few times. However, they're back on track apparently now. I've really got to applaud consortiumnews.com because they've been doing just a stellar job in keeping up with this Assange thing. They have reporters over there in London filing their reports. And this is the report. I'm going to just read a little bit of it. From Assange hearing, day 10, Fairbanks testifies, Trump ordered Assange arrest. U.S. concedes WikiLeaks not first to publish cables, but says it had the widest reach. Sounds like bullshit to me. But anyway, they're over there in the courtroom in the Old Bailey, as they call it over there in London, England. It's where a lot of the big trials happen. And this extradition hearing at the behest of the American Empire, because, of course, the British Empire, this much tinier than the American Empire, is the, you know, they used to call Tony Blair Bush's poodle. They are the lapdogs of the American Empire. So they do whatever the American Empire requests of them. Anyway, journalist Cassandra Fairbanks testified that President Donald Trump had personally ordered Julian Assange's arrest from the Ecuadorian embassy in London in April 2019. Fairbanks said, and this is early this morning today, Fairbanks said she learned in October 2018 directly from Arthur Schwartz, a Trump backer and member of the president's inner circle, that the U.S. would have Assange taken from the Ecuadorian embassy, that he would only be charged with the Chelsea Manning leaks and not for the Vault 7 CIA or the DNC email releases, that the U.S. would again go after Manning to testify against Assange, that Richard Grenell, then U.S. ambassador to Germany and later director of national intelligence, had worked out a deal with Ecuador to hand Assange over, that the order to get Assange had come directly from Trump, and that the U.S. would not seek the death penalty to make extradition possible. Because, of course, it's the law in Britain. They won't extradite if there's a possibility of the death penalty. All of these things came true, Fairbanks testified. Armed with this information, she traveled to London from Washington and met with Assange at the embassy, where she revealed these details to him. Upon return, she says she was contacted by Schwartz, who was furious because he learned of her informing Assange, evidently through surveillance at the embassy. When she tweeted about this Grenell contact, Grenell contacted her employer at the Gateway Pundit and tried to have her fired. A panicked Schwartz informed her that there was an investigation into who leaked this information to her. Fairbanks has posted the audio recording of Schwartz's call, in which he fears going to jail. That's great. She caught the motherfucker. She testified that Schwartz said Assange and everyone else at WikiLeaks should get lethal injections. Her testimony was read by defense lawyer Edward Fitzgerald after the government objected, but defense argued that hearsay rules do not apply to political testimony. Her testimony, especially of Trump's role, bolstered the defense argument that Assange's prosecution is political and therefore violates US-UK extradition treaty. It was possibly best that the prosecution forego cross-examination, say nothing, and just let Fairbanks' testimony be read in court. She stated she was a WikiLeaks supporter, so the prosecutor couldn't go after her for hiding bias. It would be difficult to pick apart her testimony, especially as she has recordings, and the prosecution would have wanted to go near surveillance at the embassy, not that Trump ordered the arrest. Earlier in the morning, there was testimony from another witness, let's see here. A testimony from an expert um, information technology forensics expert, showing how WikiLeaks was first published in other publications. Assange, the things that Assange is being charged with, in particular, I think the Manning leaks, were published first in other publications before they were published in WikiLeaks. And of course, that had been main part of the prosecution's defense, saying that that WikiLeaks had been first. Yeah, this defense witness is Christian Grothoff, a professor of computer science at Bern University, Switzerland, and basically he laid out all of this information about how it was published by cryptomy.org prior to WikiLeaks publishing it. And WikiLeaks actually had a poll, a worldwide poll, asking its supporters whether they should publish it now that all of this information had already been leaked by Cryptomy first. So, you know, it really looks to me as though this case is being torn apart by the defense, by Assange's attorneys. The prosecution is coming out with egg all over its face over and over again. They're really tearing the case apart. And this is a preview of what we'll be able to see in an Assange trial in the United States if it gets that far. And it probably will, because, as I said, the Brits are going to do anything their American masters ordered them to do. And obviously their American masters have already ordered them to turn over Assange to the American authorities. And the only reason that the Brits are even having this, you know, show trial is just for show, basically. So there you have it, Rainer. Thoughts?
Oh, well, yeah, it kind of reminds me of what happened last year. It was described by, it was last October, I think, almost a year ago, when Assange showed up for a hearing, I think it was, and there were all these. It was really just a procedure where this biased judge was carrying out these decisions for these absurd charges, and where it was really clear that the UK court system was very much ready, had been very much prepared at that point to process Assange's progression towards ultimately being imprisoned and potentially killed within the United States. And John Stone, this journalist who both of us know, John Stone made the observation that this is so incredibly abnormal, all of this, within the context of what countries like the U.S. and the U.K. present themselves as the paragons of a just criminal justice system, and paragons of freedom of expression, and refuges from the supposed dictatorships in China and North Korea. But really, they torture and persecute and carry out show trials for people like Assange, who dare to expose their secrets. Remember that this is technically about the fact that Assange and Manning exposed some hidden war crimes committed by the United States, and exposing war crimes should always be viewed as an act of heroism, never as an act of criminality.
Yes, right you are. Okay, next up. As Venezuela foils CIA terror plot, Secretary of State, U.S. Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, tours Venezuela's neighbors to talk regime change. This is a story, let me see, let me just get this up for a second here and know what I'm exactly talking about. Here we go. Yeah, this is a story also from Mint Press. I really hit the jackpot today with Mint Press news stories. But anyway, this is by Alan McLeod. Alan McLeod is a reporter for Mint Press News. And he says Venezuela's government has announced it has foiled a potential terror attack, arresting a former CIA operative while he was on stakeout near the country's largest oil refining facility. By the way, just as an aside, this oil refining facility is right next to another oil refining facility, and the two of them together are the largest oil refining complex in the world. So this is pretty significant that this CIA guy was hanging out there. Matthew John Heath was arrested with 3 other Venezuelans outside the Amoe and Cardin refineries in Falcon State in the west of the country, reportedly carrying a submachine gun, a grenade launcher, 4 blocks of C4 explosives, a sat phone, and stacks of US dollars. He has been charged with terrorism and weapons trafficking. The country's prosecutor general, Tariq William Saab, claimed that Heath entered Venezuela illegally via the Colombian border without a passport, although police found a photocopy hidden in his person. That is a photocopy of the passport. Saab also said that Heath was carrying a small coin or badge that CIA employees use to prove their identity to one another, raising suspicions. Now, this Saab, I'm sorry, this, what's his name, Heath, Matthew John Heath, yeah. This Matthew John Heath, he worked for the CIA at a secret CIA base in Iraq from 2006 to 2016, where he was hired by private security firm MVM. MVM was founded by a former U.S. Secret Service agent and continues to work closely with Washington. According to Business Directory Dun & Bradstreet, the company provides security staffing and consulting services primarily to the U.S. government entities. Need a secret agent? Question mark. Begins MVM's biography. Researcher Jeb Sprague told Mint Press today that Heath's family has a lengthy background in the oil industry. While this suggests that the operation could have been as innocent as a corporate spying mission, it is difficult to see why anyone would possess a grenade launcher's C4 if not for seriously nefarious purposes. So it goes on, and then the article talks about Pompeo. He's visiting Brazil, Colombia, the likely suspects of countries that the American empire is attempting to instigate into attacking Venezuela, even though all four of those countries mentioned together, if they attacked Venezuela, Venezuela would slaughter the fuck out of them. So I think that's therein lies their hesitation. But he was down there pushing regime change again, telling his lies again. That's what this piece of garbage, former CIA operative Mike Pompeo, who's now the head of the State Department. That's been his game for a long time. It really kind of makes you wonder why Trump hired this swamp creature. If Trump was really being truthful about draining the swamp and getting rid of the swamp creatures, why in fuck did he hire Mike Pompeo as Secretary of State, and why in fuck did he hire all these other swamp creatures for other cabinet posts? So, thoughts, Rainer?
Mao said, Mao has a quote that I always think of when the U.S. tries to sabotage Venezuela. He said, make trouble fail again until the end. Thus is the nature of how the imperialists carry out their struggle, and we need to keep fighting them until they're defeated. I didn't say it verbatim, but this is the gist of what he said. He definitely didn't say make trouble fail again. And this is what the imperialists keep doing in Venezuela. A few months ago, they hired mercenaries to try to violently overthrow the government, and a few months before then, they had this whole show about how Venezuela is carrying out narco-terrorism, supposedly. So they deployed some ship, do some paper tiger intimidation. That line from Mao about how all reactionaries, and they may appear strong, but they can actually be very weak. We see again how the paper tigers are making trouble, and they keep failing. And the only way they'll have any chance of succeeding is an outright invasion. But as according to your estimation, even 4 other Latin American countries would apparently lose to Venezuela. It would be a Vietnam where the empire again fails to defeat this band of communist of anti-imperialist militants, which is believable because the Venezuela's revolutionary army has become so strong, over 3 million strong.
Yeah. I was looking at when I was looking at those military demographics, I stumbled over force estimates from some big one of these think tanks that does that kind of work, and they were so fucking far off with Venezuela. First of all, Venezuela's professional army is more than 500,000 people. I'm sorry, professional military. Yeah, that's Air Force, Navy, and Army. So that alone was much higher. They said something like 300,000. So they were obviously going on really old statistics, which placed Venezuela in number 17, I believe, in the world. In fact, when you combine Venezuela's 2 million or more by now, but 2 million at least, last reliable figure I saw, people in the Bolivarian militias, who are highly trained as well. I mean, they're weekend warriors, yes, but I mean, look at America. The Americans had weekend warriors going off to fight wars in Iraq, Afghanistan. Weekend warriors can be highly trained too. So there's that 2 million, plus the 500,000 professional armies, 2.5 million. That makes their military more than twice as large as the American military. It's definitely, if you combine the, whatever the reactionary countries are they're talking about, I think they're probably talking about Panama, which is a pipsqueak, Brazil, which is a real powerhouse, Colombia. If you combine the armies of those three countries, I'm not sure what the fourth country that the idiot Pompeo was visiting, but if you combine just those three militaries, they're overwhelmed by the Venezuelan military. So they're alone, plus the fact you'd be fighting on Venezuelan territory, the territory that the Venezuelan people know, and the Colombians and the Panamanians and the Brazilians do not know. So another real weird thing about Pompeo's visit, when he went to Brazil, he didn't go to Brasilia, the capital of Brazil. He went to some tiny little hole-in-the-wall village that borders on Venezuela, on the Venezuelan-Brazilian border. So, his message was quite clear. So anyway, you still with us? I'm starting to fear that I've lost getting bad connections tonight. Oh, there you are.
Yes.
Yeah, you still with us?
Yes.
So
apparently we're running out of time, so I hope to cover the other two topics relating to my articles.
Yeah.
It's always such a joy to talk.
Yeah. So the next one in that category would be, let's see, Facebook grant, NATO 2030, a desperate plan to try to preserve imperial control. Take it away.
In June, an event on the Conservative Think Council, Secretary General announced a plan not just intends to expand NATO's jurisdiction to Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, and Japan, but also expands NATO's authority over the countries that are members of it. Apparently, it makes NATO take on a more political role. This is what the article about NATO 2030 that I read described it as, and apparently its political role will have something to do with the war on climate change, which is which sounds positive, but since these are the imperialists we're talking about, I'm sure whatever climate actions that they take will come with something resembling genocide or war or something along those lines. Anyway, NATO 2030, I think it's an attempt to consolidate imperial control amid an increasingly multipolar world where China and Russia and Iran and Venezuela and all of Washington's rivals are rising, and where the imperialists are freaking out over the contradictions of imperialism coming to a head. Like I was talking about earlier, in these last 4 years, the contradiction of imperialism, where the different imperial powers come into rival with each other, and where they end up weakening imperialism overall. It's been coming to a head during the Trump era, as Trump has sabotaged these treaties, and as Trump's nationalistic isolationism has brought about these disputes between the U.S. and the European Union. So there's been these tensions going on and these hostilities, and this has really weakened Washington, the position of both Washington and Europe throughout these last 4 years. And like Stalin described in the Foundations of Leninism, this contradiction of imperialism ends up not just weakening the imperial powers, but also creating more of an incentive for the international working classes to carry out proletarian revolution. As Stalin described it, this contradiction ends up making proletarian revolution a practical necessity, and we're certainly seeing this as the continual imperial decline, both in the U.S. and in Europe and in Australia and all these other neoliberal imperialist countries, as these countries experience increasing austerity and falling wages and rising of prices of goods amid this process of imperial decline. Because NATO may soon become because Australia may soon become part of NATO, but at the same time, Australia is experiencing a great economic contraction as a consequence of the imperialist Cold War with China, as the imperial powers have reacted to the rise of China through increasing anti-Chinese isolationism and trade wars. Australia, which is highly dependent on trade with China, has been hurting in these last several months, as Australia has been cut off, and as Australia has gone along with Washington's crazy campaign of Cold War hostilities. So this is economically hurting Australia, which furthers the contradictions of capitalism in Australia, which makes Australia's proletariat more likely to become revolutionary. And this applies to the rest of the neoliberal world, where the contradictions of capitalism keep piling up. And this is the historical context that NATO 2030 has appeared within. This context where capitalism and imperialism are in a process of collapse, and these NATO technocrats are desperately trying to consolidate power. Of course, as it's also been hinted in the NATO Secretary General's statement about how we need to resist the temptation for national solutions. It seems like NATO technocrats like him they're hoping for Trump to be replaced with Biden. They hope for a return to the Obama-style masked imperialism and a more pragmatic U.S. imperialism, so that they can get the core of their empire back on track in terms of imperial cooperation. But as I mentioned earlier, I don't think that this will happen. I think Trump has created means for stealing the election. And I think that one way or another, this fascist Trumpian cabal will retain control, and this will continue the recent process of furthering the contradictions of imperialism and weakening U.S. NATO hegemony.
Yeah. Well said. I think that something that's most people probably don't know, but that is well documented about the electoral system in the United States, which of course is like a gigantic patchwork because it comes from 50 state bodies of law, of electoral ballot law. I don't know if you noticed, but in states where Democrats are the one-party dictatorship, and there are many states like that, the Democrats steal the election. They use all kinds of dirty tricks, believe me. And this, like I said, this is well documented. And in the states where the Republicans run the state, there are many of those. I mean, I come from a one-party state that's typically run by the Democrats, Maryland. Although right now they do have a what do they call that? The person in the middle. What do they call that? Middle of the road, or they have some stupid, meaningless name for this. Moderate. That's it. Moderate. Yeah. Absolutely no ideological content in the word moderate. You know, what the fuck does it mean? But anyway, this is a moderate Republican who runs, who's the governor of Maryland. And anyone who knows anything about Maryland knows that Maryland has a comparatively weak governorship. Most of the power is in the legislature, and the legislature is still totally run by the Democrats. It is a one-party dictatorship in the state of Maryland. They steal the election. There's no fucking way Trump is going to win in Maryland ever, and there are many states like that. There are states teeter-tottering that have split, you know, like Maryland has now a split governments, where the legislature is all one way and the governor is another way. Those are up in the air. So you have Democrat operatives and Republican operatives stealing the elections. Yeah, I mean, it's a big toss-up over, you know, and right now, you know, there are more Republican governors than Democrat governors. However, I'm not sure that there are more Republican one-party states than Democrat one-party states. I think it's pretty well even. So, yeah, I'm not convinced that Trump's going to win. And as you saw, I mean, usually the determining factor is which side, the most powerful wing of the capitalist ruling class, that is the billionaire class, which side the billionaires side with. And the overwhelming majority of billionaires are liberals. They will side with the slimeball liberals as opposed to siding with the somewhat more fascistic Republicans. But so I think it's up in the air. I'm not going to even predict this time. Normally I would predict, but I'm not going to predict this time. Anyway, that's a great article. Moving along, because we still don't have all that much time left, and I'm not quite sure where we're going to be forced to end. I guess it will be forced to end at 10, so that gives us 20 minutes. But what was the next one on the list here? We'll skip over Syria for the time being. Let's see, and the richest 19%. Where was the other one? Did we already do all three of your articles?
No, two from what I can tell.
So where the hell did the other one go? I'm having a problem because the setup I've got, I'm trying to read this thing that's It's really, let's see, what was the third article? Do you remember?
Oh, all I have to do is look at, take a look. Forgive me if this, forgive me viewers if this changes the look of it.
It's all right. Yeah.
In Bolivia, Washington has replicated the horrors from other U.S.
Oh, there you go.
regimes.
Oh, I skipped over that. Go with it.
Yeah, and in this article, I observe how in this last year, some real historical traumas related to U.S. imperialism have been replicated in Bolivia. We've seen how the fascist coup regime that appeared after Morales last year has from the start been carrying out Croatian-style ethnic cleansing, creating death squads to massacre indigenous Bolivians, and how the regime has been torturing journalists and dissidents and disappearing people, and mobilizing the military to intimidate the population, and has been carrying out all these deadly acts of repression and torture, and thankfully this has not resulted in replication of Bolivia's past military dictatorship, but it's been a long and bloody struggle to almost restore democracy in Bolivia and get them to create new, set up a new election, which will take place on October 18th of next month. Hopefully, at least the polls indicate that the socialist candidate will win, but who knows what they'll try to sabotage him. Anyway, some historical traumas have been replicated in this last year in Bolivia, and it's reminiscent of another recent genocide and ethnic cleansing that's been going on at the behest of Washington imperialism. I'm talking about the ethnic cleansing in Ukraine that started after the 2014 Ukrainian coup called Euromaidan. Wow, that doesn't sound fascist at all. Where after the preferred U.S. Leadership got installed in Ukraine, they carried out a campaign of ethnic cleansing and camps and discrimination and systematic violence from the security Eastern Russian speaking. This neo-Nazi clique within Ukraine has been trying to use racial war against Russia, and all this for the creation of another military buffer against Russia on the part of Washington. And this is, I was actually inspired to write this article when I saw a tweet that described a series of atrocities that have been carried out in the Congo by this operative and his fellow thugs. I don't remember his name, but it was a tweet showing where this thug who was backed by the United States was bragging about how he and his compatriots had slaughtered all these people in the Congo, and how he said this was a NATO operation. We did this on behalf of NATO and in order to advance Western values. So it's the same old story in so many of these places where the U.S. has carried out regime change, or where it's set its armed groups to carry out operations. NATO has always been an organization that arms and funds neo-Nazi groups, and these groups have committed decades of atrocities in many different forms, and this includes especially in Chile, where the Pinochet regime collaborated with a neo-Nazi colony, this base camp of former SS officers who participated in and gave tips for torture techniques for the Pinochet regime's men to carry out. And so this is what I'm trying to say, that the fascists that the U.S. has installed in Bolivia are far from the first and far from the most deadly fascist regime that the U.S. has backed.
Yes. The NATO, wow. You know, a lot of people just assume that Trump really wants to withdraw the United States from NATO. If that were the case, it would be done because the president of the United States, the dictator of the United States, the emperor of 3/4 of the world's landmass, has the legal authority, that's first of all, and the power to just simply withdraw the United States from NATO if he would want to do that. Of course, that's not what he wants. That would be crazy because, I mean, NATO is an animal created by the United States, run by the United States, controlled by the United States, dictated to by the United States, by the American empire. So the whole concept is absurd. It's just more of his tactics for rattling, for first of all, for rallying the idiots around himself, the real, true, like 1/3 of the country that supports him, and for rattling the cages of the NATO allies, as they say in quotes. Trump really just wants to gouge more money out of the allies. He wants the allies to pay the same 2% that America pays. Of course, it doesn't take into consideration that the U.S. economy is tremendously larger than any of the other allies, lapdogs, I would say. And that, you know, some of them just don't have the same ability to just, you know, gouge 2% out of their working classes, which is what the United States does to get that money. So, yeah, Trump, you know, obviously is looking towards spreading the insidious tentacles of NATO, not withdrawing or not getting rid of it. And it's really sad because NATO is an organization that is made for war. It's beating the drums of war. All of its members, practically all of its members, are beating the drums of war against China, against Russia, particularly Russia first and foremost. It's a real complex issue as to why these people have such a bug up their ass about Russia, but you know, we can get into that some other time. Just suffice to say now that they do. It's really a sad state of affairs. Anyway, it looks like we're probably run out of time to address any of these other issues that I'd wanted to address. I just want to say real quick, the last issue on the list tonight, we've skipped over 2 or 3 others, but the last issue the richest 1% cause more than double the CO2 emissions of the poorest half of humanity. This comes from Oxfam. Oxfam talks about basically, the problem, and of course, people who understand the very basic, very simplistic understanding of what causes global warming will know that the drastic increase of CO2 in the atmosphere, an increase that we haven't seen in 10 million years, probably. I think maybe even the last time that the CO2 was this high in the atmosphere was when the Indian subcontinent crashed into the Asian continent, became part of the Asian continent. And the CO2 was that drastic then, mainly because a lot of CO2 producing stuff was thrown up into the atmosphere by this crash of tectonic plates. But this time it's humans, all humans. All of the increase is due to humans. That's what's causing global warming. So just wanted to get that out. I wonder if you have anything to say about that. This is, they want to blame the underdeveloped countries. These bourgeois environmentalists, they want to blame the poor countries, the global south, as they call it, the third world countries. But the evidence really is quite clear that, where does this 1% live? They live in Europe, they live in the United States, they live in Australia, New Zealand, they live in Japan, South Africa a little bit too. The colonial settler states, that's where they live, and the old Europe imperialist states, that's where the 1% lives. That's who's causing most of this. And a huge, huge part of that just comes from America, which is 5% of the population, but accounts for 25% of the consumption and around the same amount of the CO2 emissions. So the American empire is by far the worst in this. We need a revolution. We need a socialist revolution to conquer this.
Yeah, and because socialist revolution is a solution all around. Because if socialist revolutions were able to defeat Western imperialism, as they call the U.S., Europe, and New Zealand, if without U.S. imperialism as a factor, then these so-called underdeveloped countries, they would stop being overexploited and they could develop more, and of course they would get more larger living standards, and then the solution would have to be to carry out socialist revolutions within them so that CO2 emissions could be reduced. Socialist revolution globally is the only way to bring down this vast damage we've already done, to mitigate it.
Yes. Unfortunately, we didn't get to this other Mint Press article titled Facebook Live Rant by Trump, Coronavirus PR Guru Deepens Fears of Election Violence. And that harkens back to the issues you were talking about up front, about the fears of election violence. This is a very real thing, and it reflects the civil war, almost civil war going on within the capitalist ruling class for the last 4 years between Trump supporters and Democrat supporters, and a real huge part of the upper echelons of the capitalist ruling class are Democrats. They are Democrat supporters. I mean, they give money to both, but in their heart of hearts, they're liberals.
How much time do we have?
We've got less than 3 minutes.
Oh, well, yeah, this reflects what I talked about earlier about how in these last 4 years, there have been some drastic measures, strikingly drastic measures that the anti-Trump faction of the ruling class has been trying to take, like they, I don't know how realistic that's ever. Apparently, I remember a couple years ago there was even talk of an FBI coup against Trump, like these FBI operatives who were using Russiagate to in their hopes to remove Trump and replace him with somebody like somebody who would carry out U.S. imperialism more competently, because that's the core of why they've created the Russiagate scandal and of why much of the U.S. ruling class is backing Biden, because they feel like Trump is exacerbating the contradictions of capitalism, and they want to mitigate it by returning it to the Obama paradigm.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I think that's our show for the night. We've got less than 1 minute now. So I want to thank everyone for listening in, for listening to us on wherever we're appearing these days, on YouTube, on SoundCloud, and we'll be searching for other places to deposit our wares, so to speak, to sell our wares, whatever you want to call that. So thank you for listening in, for tuning in, for watching. Thank you, Rainer, as always, for doing the stupendous job that your brilliant mind brings to the show. And thank you very much. Until next week, so long.
Okay, bye. Please bye to the viewers.
Pardon me?
Or at least bye to the viewers.
Yeah. Bye to the viewers. Okay, yeah. Yeah, apparently we can go on. I had set 2 hours, but they're not kicking us off yet, so that's good. Anyway, so any final thoughts?
Well, let's see how much the contradictions of capitalism and imperialism keep getting exacerbated. I mean, I don't know if I believe in trying to exacerbate accelerationism, but we see how the accelerationism that Trump has brought is really making the empire tear apart at the seams, and we see how these NATO technocrats and these Democratic Party neocons and the anti-Trump Republican neocons are trying to restabilize the empire, and they're doing this through anti-Russian xenophobia and through a relentless campaign to really try to exploit Americans' fears of the recent instability to get them on board with a return to the Obama era, to return to the so-called normal before the Trump era. I remember how this started off in 2017, right after the election, and this Hillary Clinton-tied Democratic Party neocon clique was coordinating these operations to propagate sensational stories about Russia, and suddenly they were trying to rehabilitate George W. Bush. So they were trying to. It seemed like they were both trying to instigate paranoia, Cold War paranoia, renewed Cold War paranoia about Russia, and to instill some kind of weird nostalgia for the Bush era, to what they see as happier times, evidently, the times before things really started to spin out of control.
Yes. Sounds like good gist for your article mill. Yeah, as I said before, I don't know which way this is going to go. I do kind of highly suspect that we're going to see violence. I wish I had been able to get into that Mint article before, because that's what it was really about. Watch out because there's going to be violence between these two factions of the ruling class, between these two factions of capitalist supporters, which includes liberals and conservatives. And not all conservatives side with Trump. You know, I mean, there's neocons, and there's paleocons, and the paleocons are the ones that are all paleocons and fascists and Nazis and Ku Klux Klan. They're the ones that are all about Trump. But there's a sizable wing of the Republican Party too that is just appalled at Trump's anti-globalism. You know, and Trump has caved in a lot on this, on a lot of issues, but he hasn't caved in on the trade issues. There's definitely a trade war going on with many countries, including some of Washington's closest lapdogs. You know, I mean, nothing to get your own lapdog biting your hand better than you know, antagonizing, poking at them, poking at the lapdogs, as Trump's been doing with these trade wars. So, I mean, there's a lot of people pissed off in the ruling class. There's a lot of people pissed off among dyed-in-the-wool Democrats and dyed-in-the-wool Republicans, among dyed-in-the-wool neocons and neo-libs, or we'll just call it liberals, because that's what they really are. Liberals and neocons on the one side, and paleocons and fascists and Nazis and Ku Klux Klanners on the other side. It's really looking like this is like 1860 all over again. I mean, the differences in these various wings of the capitalist ruling class, and in the various wings of the idiots who follow the capitalist ruling class, is pretty big and serious. Although it's hard for me to fathom, because I mean, they tend to agree on most things. You know, they agree on crushing the working class worldwide. They agree on war against China. They agree on. They seem to really do agree on war against Russia, because that's what Trump has been exacerbating. You know, if Trump really was serious about détente with Russia, he wouldn't have done what he's done for the last 3.5, almost 4 years, which is to wage hybrid asymmetrical warfare against Russia. Trump is doing that, you know. And how do I know Trump is doing that? That it's not some mysterious deep state, blah, blah, blah. I know because a lot of the things that the U.S. government has done require Trump's signature. And I really seriously doubt that anybody put a gun to his head and forced him to sign all these war moves, all these acts of war, like economic sanctions, economic sabotage, actual war in in Ukraine and Syria. Nah, that doesn't happen without the American emperor's signature, his approval. So that's how I know. Anyway, so good points. Good show.
Yeah, hopefully we can expand. We can have a recorded version of our last 5 minutes conversation next week.
Yeah, well, I'm still recording, so
Oh,
I could run it. I could run it, and I'll just say this is the after show. I'll just do a little text over saying, and now for the after show, Rainer and Chris, blah blah blah. So there you have it.
Yeah. Well, when you mentioned the so-called deep state, I thought about the QAnon cult, and how there's this idea that's gripped so many people so strongly that it feels kind of, I don't like Orwell, but I would say it's kind of Orwellian how they get people to use double think, two thoughts at once, and if this turns out to be a lie, then it doesn't discredit Q or Trump because disinformation is necessary to carry out the end goal that will result in the storm and massive violence against Trump's political opponents. So it seems like it's a psyop that's priming Trump's base for a scenario where Trump does carry out a legitimately fascist coup d'etat and enacts political violence, which is scarily reflective of what you were just speculating about. I mean, the storm's end goals do align with like the events that involved Hitler's rise to power, and these people are going along with it because it's because the Democrats are all pedophiles, and pedophilia only comes from one side of the ruling class. It's not like it's a problem inherent to capitalism. It's madness. It's meritocracy.
It is. Yeah, and that's what these insane liberals and conservatives are going to be going at it, apparently, over. Hopefully most of the working class stands aside and lets them go at each other, and maybe they'll kill each other off. I doubt that, but because most of these people, they don't do their own fighting. They hire working class kids to do their fighting for them. So, but violence, they're worried about a few rambunctious kids breaking store windows and grabbing some free stuff. If that's what, the violence that they're concerned about, I hope that this clash between sectors of the ruling class never takes place, because that'll be real violence, because all sectors of the ruling class are ultra violent. That's what they believe in. The idiot liberals who tell us so, violence never solved anything. Their owners, their controllers believe in violence, and it's the only solution they ever implement. Right.
Now, let's see, how late is it? It's after 10. I'm getting kind of tired.
Yeah, it's 10:11.
So
that's it.
No.
Okay.
Right.
So for real this time, so long. Goodbye, everyone. And that's it. We're out of here. Hasta la vista. Talk to you during the week.
Bye.